Today I'm on the hunt for some waterfalls, and I'm going to try to get the same composition with different shutter speeds and different settings and compare them and see which settings are the best for waterfall photography.
I have two filters on, a B&W polarizer and then a MD4, and I think that's putting me right about the exact light that I'm looking for to try to get that silky smooth water while also getting all the detail that's in the shadows. I don't have any direct sun, so that's not a big deal, but man, this looks like a wonderful shot.
Waterfall photography is completely up to the photographer's perception or their perspective. What looks great to me may not look great to you. But when I'm shooting waterfalls, oftentimes my settings are just kind of all over the place, and I'm taking a lot of captures with a lot of different settings just to make sure that I get one that works. It'd be nice to have a nice neutral target that I'm aiming for, and I think putting these photographs up beside each other with their settings will help me decide kind of what a nice average neutral number is whenever I'm going into waterfall photography. That way I can start there and kind of adjust according to the light and the scene. On this first shot at Bash Bish Falls, I wanted to try to keep the same exposure. So I had to adjust my ISO 4 stops up to 250 from the original shot on the left, which was 100. And so what I came out with is what 4 stops of shutter speed looks like on this waterfall in this scene. What I was hoping for was 2 photos that were identical as far as exposure, but different as far as shutter speed to show me the differences in the water, the texture of the water, how silky it looks. The water is one of the main features in a waterfall. You have a foreground most of the time, and that's probably your other main feature, but the water itself is the thing that really sticks out in a waterfall photography shot. And in this case, I think the 0.3 second or the longer exposure looks just a little bit better. On this next shot at Bash Bish Falls, I wanted to keep the f-stop and the ISO the same and just look at the difference between the shutter speed itself. So the photo on the left was 1 second, the photo on the right was 2 seconds. And now this one's a pretty close call, but I think if you look at the bottom of the falls where it hits the water itself, I think that's where the difference is gonna lie in this comparison. If you look at the 1 second photo, it's not quite as silky, it's not quite as soft. If you look at the 2 second photo, it's definitely a little bit more soft. And I made this mistake when I was in Costa Rica and I shot the La Fortuna waterfall, amazing waterfall, but I shot it too soft. I had too slow of a shutter speed, and it was really hard to adjust in post-processing. I mean, once you shoot something in that nice long shutter speed, there's not a whole lot you can do to recover it later. And I took most of my shots with too slow of a shutter speed. Now this is only 3 stops of difference, but I think you can start to see that. And this is just going to be a preference thing. Every photographer is going to be different. And so here's another shot of Bash Bish Falls, and this is a 3-stop exposure difference. I made up for the exposure difference by raising the ISO, kind of like I did in the first comparison. On the photo on the left, I think you can see just a little too much detail in parts of the waterfall and where it meets the water down below. Not everywhere, but just in selective parts, especially if you zoom in. On the photo on the right, 0.3 of a second, it's just a little bit more silky without being too much. And the way that I tell whether it's too much is usually just by looking where the waterfall itself meets the water or the rocks or whatever it's splashing against at the bottom. And so this is only a 3-stop difference, but I still think if you look really closely, I think the 0.3 of a second shot is just a little bit better when it comes to my preferences. And my preference for a waterfall shot is a nice sharp foreground with a nice silky smooth waterfall. And you don't want it too silky and soft, and you don't want it, too detailed. You want it right in the middle, right where that sweet spot is. So the trick is trying to figure out where that sweet spot is. And so far from the comparisons we've done, it's somewhere between 0.3 and 1 second. So let's take a look at some of the stops in between there, 0.5, 0.6, and 0.8. All other settings were kept the same. It's just the 0.8 is going to be a little lighter than the 0.5 because we have 3 stops of difference in light. So what I'm looking here for is the sweet spot when it comes to that silky smoothness in the water itself. I think you can kind of see a little bit of a difference. The 0.8 is more filled in or more full, more white where the water itself is. And the 0.5, you can start to see some thin areas. And for me, the trick is to try to get the picture to represent what I visually saw mixed with the emotion that I felt when I took the capture. And in this case, I think the 0.8 is just a little bit too soft, a little bit too full. The 0.5 is just a little bit too thin. And so I'm going with the 0.6 second exposure when I'm comparing these 3. I think it just, it's literally right in the middle, and I think it looks the best. So let's take a look at this next set of photos, and this set of photos is a little more complex. There's a high dynamic range, but I think that makes the silkiness or the appearance of the water even that more important. If you get to a 1.3 second exposure, I just think it's just a little too bold, a little too soft, and it's just a little too much. The 0.8 second exposure all the way on the left, I think it's fine. I think it looks pretty good. However, when you're able to put them side by side, like in this case, I think the middle photo, the 1 second exposure, is the best. The water is silky, it has just enough detail in it, it's not overly soft, and at the base of the waterfall where the water meets the rest of the stream, you can still see detail and it kind of blends together really nicely. I think the 1 second exposure is the better looking exposure of these 3. The picture on the left is 0.6 seconds exposure, and the picture on the right is the 1 second exposure. But what I want you to notice here is that we have much more light than we did in the other photos. And so you really get to see the definition and the detail of the actual water and the silkiness and the streams that are coming from the top to the bottom. And I think it's obvious from this comparison that where we need to aim, or where I'm going to aim my waterfall shots to be, is in the area of about 1 second. And every photograph's gonna be different, every scene's gonna be different, and you have to adjust a little here and a little there. But for me, and what I have as preferences for what I'm looking for the end result of my shots, 1 second is where I wanna be with my settings, and that's gonna be my baseline from now on. I really appreciate you joining me. I hope you got something out of the video. If you haven't subscribed already, please do me a favor and go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I can't wait to talk to you next time.